Hello, this is Julian Treasure joining London's Calling. Delighted to be with you in whatever form. Sorry it couldn't be physically as it was originally going to be, or even live as we then planned. For whatever reason, you're now with me as a recording, but I am delighted to be with you in whatever way we could manage. I think this is going to be a much more common form of learning in the future, actually, for people like me who've traveled the world for years, spending a lot of time on aeroplanes and a lot of time on stages, talking to thousands and thousands of people live. I think this is the future. We're going to be doing far less of that in future. I think the world has changed forever, don't you? And we may well never get back to that world of plane hopping and meeting in large groups quite as we once did. I'm going to speak to you today about the crucial skills of speaking itself and listening, particularly the second of those, listening, the silent skill, the thing that is so often ignored and yet so crucial in business, your business, and in the business of selling, of course. So let me share my screen, and you should now be seeing a picture of lovely Orkney. That's where I live. Well, not actually that. That's the Ring of Brodgar, which is thousands of years old. It wouldn't be very comfortable living there. But it's not a few miles from where I do live, and the day is very much like that as I record. It's a beautiful place up here in Orkney, and I am very happy living here in the peace and quiet, away from the hurly-burly. I'm going to move on to share my screen with PowerPoint, and you should now have a black screen. That's entirely intentional, because I'm going to start by asking you to do something very important indeed, and that is listen. Listen. Now, if you're like me, you're in a quiet room. You might have headphones on like me, so you won't be hearing much else. But it is lovely to think that this is the sound of hundreds of people consciously listening. In other words, you knew you were doing something there. Most of the time, we're unconscious in our listening. We think it's the same as hearing. It isn't. It's a skill, and it's a skill that you can practice. It's a skill which gives rise to an awful lot of important things in our lives. I mean, how do you learn if you don't listen? How do you lead people if you don't listen to them and understand them? How do you persuade people? Any great salesperson, and I'm sure you all know many, will tell you that the most important part of the sales conversation is the listening, not the speaking. How can you build relationships without listening? What's the most common complaint in relationships? He or she never listens to me. And understanding as well, of course. Listening is the doorway to understanding always, and you only have to look at what happens if we start not listening. Around the world, we've seen that in politics for the last few years, the politics of divisiveness, of polarization, of caricature, of demonization, shouting. Politicians go off and have talks. Do you know, I wish they would go off and have listens instead. I think the world would be a much happier place, don't you? Well, now, these things are all really important, but let me suggest there are three more fundamental things which are absolutely affected by how well you listen in your life. And those are your happiness, effectiveness, and well-being. Three pretty important things, I think you'll agree. And I'll attempt to prove some of that in this talk. As I go through this, I'd like you to listen actually for three things. It's different sort of three things that start with the words I will or I will not. I'd love this to be a talk that actually makes a difference in your life, not one that vaporizes, like it evaporates like a puddle in the sun afterwards. He was really good. I can't remember what he said, but I really enjoyed it. You know, I'd like you to feel at the end of this that you've got some action points, as they're called in business speak. So how about as I speak, you have a piece of paper next to you and you just write down whenever it occurs to you things like, I will do this or I will not do that anymore. You may end up with more than three, but I'd love you to commit to three. Now, a couple of words about me. I mean, you've had a brief introduction. I started a company called The Sound Agency in 2003 after a 15-year career in magazine publishing, actually. And I wrote a book called Sound Business in 2007, which has helped this little audio branding industry to grow. What's audio branding? It's asking, how does your brand sound? So we are the people who make those little brand logos, sonic logos. Intel, for example, you might recognize, not one of ours, but very famous. That's the kind of thing we do. So that book gave rise to a lot of interest, and I had the honor of doing 5 TED Talks, back-to-back years, actually, on the stage of that amazing conference. If anybody listening to this doesn't know TED, go and check out TED.com, and you'll have a wonderful time. It's all free. It's amazing. And those TED Talks of mine have been seen by something like 100 million people now, which boggles my mind every time I think about it. And then a year and a bit ago, I wrote another book, which was called How to Be Heard. And that book is all about the really important skills of speaking and listening, because it came really clear to me through years working with the sound agency, 16 years now, that most people, most organizations don't listen. And that's why sound is so poorly designed around us most of the time. So the sound agency has been helping that situation with clients for, as I say, 16 years. And we've just launched a new product called Mood Sonic, which I'm very excited about. It's taking our work out from shopping malls and airports and places like that, where we've been improving the sound. And that does not mean playing mindless music. It means often removing music and installing clever generative soundscapes, textures of sound, which are very subtle. We've now designed some of that for the office, for the open plan office, where millions of people are having their lives blighted. We'll talk about that more in a short while. That's Mood Sonic. So here are the 4 ways that we communicate: reading, writing, speaking, listening, to send, to receive, 2 for the ears, 2 for the eyes. Pretty simple. And I've showed them here with equal weight, but that is not the way we treat them in society, or indeed in education, is it? It's a lot more like this. We barely teach speaking, and really not at all listening, the silent skill, as I said. It's very rare. So let's give a little bit of attention to these poor unattended things, which are so crucial in your life, speaking and listening. And I'd like to start by defining listening. And then I will move on to say some words about speaking and then focus back on listening again. So what is listening? As I said, it's a skill. It's not the same as hearing. You hear everything, and then you do 2 things with listening. You select certain things to pay attention to, and you make them mean something. So my definition is making meaning from sound. You don't pay attention to all the sound around you. You do ascribe meaning to anything you pay attention to. Now, the most important thing I want to get across to you immediately about listening is that your listening is unique. As unique as your fingerprints, your voice print, your iris is unique. Why? Because we all listen through a set of filters. Now, it's the most common mistake in the world. I see it all the time for people to assume everybody listens like I do. They don't. And once you crack that, it gives you access to immensely improved power in your communication. We'll discover how in a short while. So the filters that you're listening through right now, that I'm listening through, that every human being listens through, include the culture you're born into, the language you speak, the values, attitudes, beliefs that you accrete along the way from your parents, from friends, from teachers, from role models, anybody. You're pulling some in and you're spurning others, and you have a different set from me. You've come a different road to this conversation, to the road I've come. So we have different experiences, different values, attitudes, beliefs. And you know how hard it is to listen to somebody approvingly or understandingly that you really disagree with. Barack Obama said, I like to listen especially to people I disagree with. Well, there aren't many people like that in the world. Most of us much prefer listening to people we agree with, and we find it easy to assimilate assumptions about the way the world works, about how people think about us, about how we are perceived. Expectations. You probably have expectations for this talk. I hope I'm fulfilling them. But expectations, as my dad always used to say, can be the mother of resentment. If you have expectations that are not met, it can make listening very hard. Intentions. You might have an intention here. I hope I've given you an intention to write down 3 things which you're going to have at the end, 3 actions you're going to take. And finally, you have emotions. Emotions and listening are almost polar opposites. If somebody is really upset, the best way to calm them down is to listen And by the same token, if I'm really upset, I'm not going to listen to you very carefully at all. So listening and emotions can be antithetical. These things combine to create your reality. Now, that's quite exciting, because if you can change your filters, you can actually change the way the world occurs to you, what you pay attention to, what you make it mean, how the world is. Because after all, we've only got perception. It's never the meal. It's always the menu. It's never the territory. It's always the map. It's all happening inside your head. And you've got a lot of power over that. Now, let me talk for a few minutes about how sound affects us, because this is one very good reason why listening is very, very important to do. Sound has powerful effects on us, even though most of the time our relationship with sound is a bit like this, isn't it? I mean, when's the last time you really thought about sound and how it's affecting you? But it really does. It does it in 4 ways, and I'm going to go through those 4 ways with you right now. Here's the first. Sorry about that. That's a little shot of cortisol, your fight-flight hormone. Any sudden sound will do that to you. That's genetic. It's been there for hundreds of thousands of years. There isn't a vertebrate on the planet without ears. For that reason, hearing is your primary warning sense. You can hear all around you. Let me calm you down again. Gentle surf like this is a very soothing sound, similar cadence to the sleeping breathing of a human being, and also a sound we associate with being on a beach, not a care in the world. Very good if you have problems sleeping. I won't leave it on for too long right now for obvious reasons. Second way sound affects us is psychologically. It changes our feelings. This piece of music isn't going to make you feel happy. It wasn't designed to make you feel happy. We all know that music can be immensely powerful in changing our feelings, moderating them or exaggerating them. It's not the only sound that changes feelings. We use birdsong a lot at the sound agency, actually, in our soundscapes, because we've learned over hundreds of thousands of years, all of us, that when the birds are singing like this, we're pretty safe. So birdsong makes people feel secure. It's also nature's alarm clock, time to be mentally awake and alert. So it's a very useful sound for working, actually. Highly recommended. The third way sound affects you is cognitive. You can't understand 2 people talking at the same time, or in this case, one person talking twice. It's not possible, is it? You can't do it. You have bandwidth for about 1.6 human conversations. So if you work in an office that sounds like this, particularly if there's one person behind you talking about their great night out last night, your productivity is mashed. Now, whenever I do this to a big audience, people are nudging each other and nodding, apart from the managers who are in their own office going, what's he talking about? We all know this one. Open plan is becoming one size fits all, but it doesn't fit all, actually. We need different types of office working space to fit different types of working. Open plan is fine up to a point. For collaboration, I say up to a point because the latest research is showing that people in open plan feel intimidated about being overheard, and therefore they're sending more emails than even they used to in closed offices. We need a different type of working space for concentration. Of course we do, where the rule is, shh, no talking here, a bit like a library. And then we have contemplation. You might need breakout spaces, chill out spaces, or social spaces where people aren't working and they need to do something to recharge. Finally, we have communication. The office where it's so quiet, the turning of a piece of paper is a major event. I pick up a phone in that, Mum, can I call you back? Everybody's listening to me. It's very intimidating. And of course, the moment I take a call, who am I putting off? Everyone. So in that kind of office, we need some masking sound or something like that to create some privacy. Okay, and then we have social spaces. I recorded this in this canteen for an advertising agency in London. Now, I like Metallica as much as the next guy, but perhaps not when I'm trying to have a quiet sandwich. But no wonder he looks like this. I would in this kind of an environment. Oh my goodness. Sound can do good, sound can do ill. It can harm your health enormously. Good sound creates endorphins. It gives us pleasure hormones and it makes us feel good and be happy. Bad sound creates stress, and stress is not good for you in the long run. Good sound can reduce your blood pressure. Bad sound will elevate it. And Elevated blood pressure leads to risk of heart attacks. Teachers, for example, are probably increasing their risk of heart attacks significantly by working in classrooms where the average noise level is now shown to be 65 decibels or more. And that is dangerous. Chronically exposed people are definitely having increased risk of heart attack in that kind of environment. Whereas good sound can increase your immune system. And then good sound is good for focus. Bad sound is very good for wrecking your concentration, as we've seen with dramatic results. Good sound leaves people in environments feeling comfortable, satisfied, generally good. Bad sound tends to lead to unhappiness, to irritability, to frustration, to fatigue, all of those kind of things. Good sound is shown to increase people's commitment in offices. Bad sound is leading to increased absenteeism, sickness, and just people not wanting to be there, working from home and so forth, which we're all doing now. Nevertheless, that is the case. The fourth way sound affects everybody is behaviorally. So ask yourself, is this person going to drive at a steady 30 miles an hour? Somehow, I doubt it. It's much more likely that that kind of sound is going to change the driving style. And in fact, research backs that up. Fast-paced music makes us walk faster, chew faster, move faster, and drive faster. So sound has profound effects on our behavior. At the simplest, we'll move away from unpleasant sound if we can. So if I were to put this on and leave it for the next half hour or so, I don't think you'd still be in this seminar. If you take off your headphones and leave and say, thank you very much, I'm not staying there. So we will move away from unpleasant sound if we can. And shops are just starting to understand the effect of this on their sales, which is devastating. So sound affects your happiness, effectiveness, and well-being. Listening is the conduit. It's how you can control those things. Let's zoom in on the speaking and the listening, the most important form of sound. The human voice, after all, the most powerful sound in the world, probably, this amazing instrument we all play. It's the only sound that can say I love you or start a war, isn't it, generally? Most people think that the relationship between speaking and listening is like this, a straight line. I speak, you listen, that's it. No, fundamentally wrong. Actually, the relationship is circular because the way I speak affects the way you listen, and the way you listen affects the way I speak. And more than that, the way I speak affects the way you speak, and the way I listen affects the way you listen. There's an interaction going on all the time in this dynamic circular relationship. And that is all happening within a context. And the context very often is not very helpful. Noisy offices or rooms, bad acoustics, all sorts of things in the way, telephone lines that are crackling. There are lots of compromising circumstances where we're struggling to make this circle work as well as it could. Let's have a little look at speaking in more detail. And then I really want to focus on listening. I'm going to start with the dark side. There are a few things I really want you to pay attention to look out for, things which get in the way substantially. If you want to speak powerfully, if you want to be somebody who's taken seriously, if your complaint might be people never listen to me, or people don't pay me any attention, or I can't get my points across, then these may be some of the obstacles to that happening. There's two habits, first of all, that I want to bring to your attention. I'm not saying never do them. I'm not saying they're evil, bad, or wrong. I'm simply saying if you do them a lot, or if they're driving you in some way, they make you harder to listen to. Here's the first one. Looking good. Well, we all like to look good, don't we? Yes, of course we do. But if it becomes your motivator, your driving force, then it does make you harder to listen to. Looking good can give rise to certain behaviors which are pretty hard to be around. Speech writing, for example, where actually I'm not listening while this noise is going on in front of me, this inconvenient sound. I'm not actually listening at all. I'm writing my next brilliant bit of dialogue. And that tends to give rise to the anyway interruption, just throwing away what the person was saying, changing the subject because I've got something more important to say. That kind of thing is demeaning to the person who was speaking, and people get very upset with it. Do you know an I know person? I know. If you know everything, how much are you going to learn? Knowing is not really the point. Looking good can get in the way of learning a great deal. It's kind of the opposite of humility, isn't it? And right-sizing ourselves, particularly now, I think is a very good idea. Now, if there's one thing we like more than looking good, it's being right, isn't it? The American author Harville Hendricks said you can either be right or be in a relationship. Now, I think there's a lot of truth in that. Making others wrong, unfortunately, is the easiest way to be right. And we're seeing that all the time. My goodness, if you ever read comments columns underneath newspaper articles or any kind of social media, you'll have people ranting. I will come back to opinions shortly, but making other people wrong, it's outrageous. Who's to blame? Blah, blah, blah. That's making myself feel better because I'm right and they're wrong. If they're wrong, they're down there. If I'm right, I'm up here. I'm higher. And I've elevated my status, and my feelings about myself are better. Self-righteousness tends to give rise to behaviors like interrupting. Are there any interrupters out there? Well, if that's you, I have a simple tip for you. Take a deep breath before you speak. Just get into the habit. It's good for your voice, and also you might just realize the person opposite you is still speaking. Now, those two habits give rise to a lot of serious issues in conversation, in communication. I've corralled several of them here into the 7 deadly sins of communication. Again, I'm not saying never, 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 but I am saying pay attention, because if you do these things a lot, they will probably make you harder to listen to. They'll make your speaking less effective. The first of the 7 is gossip, by which I mean speaking ill of somebody not present. Now, that is quite seductive. We all get very interested by gossip, but gossip is often untrue. It's never well-meaning. And if you're listening to somebody gossiping all the time and you walk away, who are they going to start gossiping about? Well, it's you, of course. They probably were just before you got there. So ultimately, gossip is a kind of discarded form of communication, seductive, but not productive. The second deadly sin, something to avoid if you can, is condemnation. I'm not talking about discernment here or being careful. I'm talking about judging people and finding people at fault, never being satisfied. Have you ever come across, I'm talking about the kind of parent whose child comes home and says, I got 95 in the test, and they say, what happened to the other 5? That kind of judgment and finding fault. Making people wrong is very much part of that, and it's hard to be around, isn't it? Then we have negativity. My mother unfortunately became very negative at the end of her life, and her kind of worldview became everything's awful. So I remember taking a newspaper into her, and I said, oh, look, it's October the 1st. And she said, I know, isn't it awful? Well, you know, if October the 1st is awful, what hope is there really? It's wearing to be around somebody like that, isn't it? You have to go away and recharge your batteries and come out, oh, look, the sun's out, it'll be raining later. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard to be around. So watch out for your use of the word not. That's the giveaway, not. If there's a lot of nots in what knows, can'ts, nots, then you need perhaps to pay attention to, are you being too negative? Cousin of negativity, the British national pastime, complaining. My goodness, there's a lot of that going on at the moment. Well, there are things we can do something about. If you're in a restaurant and they give you bad food, complain. Coronavirus, what can we do? There is no point in complaining about it, wishing it were otherwise. Sometimes we just have to accept the world and get on with it. You can complain about the government, but you only get one choice every 4 years. And we had that not so long ago in this country. So I'm talking about viral misery. I'm talking about complaining about things you can't do anything about. It's just spreading misery to other people. Then we have excuses, never taking responsibility. Some people are blame throwers, aren't they? It's always somebody else's fault. Never me. I couldn't know, it wasn't my fault. This happened, this happened, this happened. But if it's never your fault, you don't learn anything. It's so much more productive to say, I'm sorry, I messed up. I've learned, and this is what I'm going to do next time, or this is what I put in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. The last but one, exaggeration. Now, there's a lot of exaggeration going on all the time in language now. I've just used some of it a lot, all the time. It's a huge habit that has become endemic in conversation. I'll give you a couple of examples. Call it verbal inflation, if you like. It used to be okay to be excited about something. I'm really excited about this. Now, that's not enough. You have to be super excited, don't you? And I guess for you, soon it'll be that you have to be super, super excited or hyper excited or something. So there's this kind of inflation going on. Words like fantastic and amazing used to mean something different from just good, but now they've all been dumbed down to mean good. It's a shame because it dumbs our language down. And I always castigate my American friends about what they've done to the word awesome. If a pair of trainers is awesome, what do you say when you see an amazing sunset? So we have to be careful about exaggeration. It can lead, if it's a habit, it can lead to out and out lies. Finally, dogmatism, my way or the highway. Opinions are not facts. Opinions, facts, two different things. If you can start to distinguish that, it will make your conversation much clearer. In my opinion, or I believe that, are little phrases which are seldom used these days. And if they are removed from language, you tend to end up with a lot of table thumping and shouting. And that is not such a productive place to be. Now, what's the antidote to all this? I would suggest standing on 4 cornerstones of powerful speaking. Fortunately, they form a word that's easy to remember. I like acronyms because I have terrible memory. The acronym here is HAIL, which means to greet or acclaim enthusiastically, but they stand for 4 very important cornerstones of powerful speaking. Wonder if you can guess what they stand for. Well, the H, that's honesty, by which I mean simply being clear and straight in what you're saying. That's all. The A is authenticity. That is being yourself, not pretending to be somebody else, not having to put on an act, but simply being yourself. The I is integrity, which is to say being your word. If you say it, it happens. If you're somebody who says it, makes promises, and they don't happen, people simply won't listen to you. And the L is love, by which I do not mean romantic love. I simply mean wishing people well. And a great exercise is to repeat that in your mind as you go about, particularly now we're all under such stress. I wish you well, I wish you well, I wish you well. Even if you disagree with people or they're in your way or something, instead of get out of my way, you idiot, it's, I wish you well, I wish you would get out of my way, but I wish you well. You have a lighter way of being if you're actually wishing people well. And I can tell you as a speaker, that is crucial because when you're standing in front of people presenting or whatever you're doing, it's not about you. It's about wishing those people well and giving them a gift. So those were a few words on speaking. Now I'm going to focus on listening for the rest of this talk. Listening. I said that we're not listening very well. Actually, I think we're losing our listening really badly. Many reasons for this. First of all, we've invented ways to record things, and that is all happening all the time. Right now, I'm using it. So that once upon a time, you sat at the feet of your guru, and if you missed it, you missed it. Now, not so much. You can always check it later on YouTube, or he's got a book, or, there's always a way. So the premium on careful attention has gone. And then we have the intensity and the fast cut of modern life, our lack of patience. We used to have oratory in parliaments, not anymore. It's now sound bites and shouting. And this cartoon is brilliant, but sadly, terribly, terribly true when we're having diplomacy in 140 characters, goodness knows. Then we have the effect of technology. Now, just in terms of text, I'm sure none of you have ever sent this text message. I hope none of you have ever received it, but it does get sent and it does get received. That's not a conversation, is it? Where's the listening in that? What you definitely will be more familiar with is this torrent of stuff coming in your inbox all the time. Mindless CCing, hundreds of people, round robin circulars. If this were physical, none of us would be able to get through our front door anymore. I mean, it was bad enough when it was physical. I can remember that. Many of you probably can't. But now we have email coming in. I mean, I get hundreds of emails a day, and triaging all that lot it's a constant problem, and it creates stress, doesn't it? Because you're thinking, I should be responding, blah, 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 blah. Technology can become a bit of a monster, can't it? And it's unstoppable. Nobody can turn back the tide. So we simply have to pay attention to our relationship with technology and ask questions like, is it healthy for me to be doing email in bed? I hope you don't do that. I do recommend you don't do that. Are you always on? Are you expected to respond at 5 minutes notice at 10 p.m. or on a Sunday morning? Well, that's not okay. We need downtime. We need to have a balanced relationship with technology. Maybe try doing some phone holidays. It can be like cutting an arm off, but you could try a few hours without your phone, especially at meal times. Then we've got social media, which overlay all of this. Now they create this thing called FOMO, or fear of missing out. And they also create this kind of fantasy that we've got lots of friends. I mean, the word friend means something a bit different from what it did 30 years ago. They're not real friends. We've gone from a few deep relationships to many, many shallow ones, I think. There's a great book on that by fellow TED speaker and also professor at MIT, Sherry Turkle, which I recommend very strongly. Right, let's move on to consider how we can listen better. Well, first of all, I want to distinguish 3 kinds of listening. The first I will consider is created listening. Now, you may not have come across this. It's a concept which I've kind of come up with, but I think it's very useful. Created listening. In your life, you create a listening for yourself. And I'll give you a great example of how important this can be in business. Ratner's was the go-to place for engagement rings for the whole of Britain, really, the United Kingdom's leading jeweler in the 80s. In April 1991, Gerald Ratner, who was the boss, gave a speech at the Institute of Directors where he said that his store's prices were so cheap because the products were crap. Now, he was being wry, self-effacing, and so forth. He went on to compare Ratner's earrings to an M&S prawn sandwich, except they wouldn't last as long. He was being amusing. There was a lot of laughter, but there were some journalists present. And when this got reported, people don't like being taken for mugs. There was outrage. And the effect on Ratner's was devastating. It wiped £500 million off the value of the group. He had to resign. The group had to change its name. It relaunched as Signet and is much smaller now. And he now goes around the world talking about how to preserve and take care of your reputation. He's something of an expert in how not to do that. Now, I wonder what listenings you create for yourself. Now, that's only half of created listening because, if people know something about you, they have a listening for you. But also, as we've already said, they bring a listening to the party. They're filters. So even in a group like this, a big audience, there is a listening that you're speaking into. I'm speaking into one now. So it's all of you have brought your listenings to this. You may know something about me, and that combination is speaking into a listening. It's the created listening that's out there. If you start to ask yourself the question, what's the listening? Every time you're speaking to a single person or to a group of people, you will speak so much more powerfully. It's a great habit to be in it. Just get into doing that all the time. What's the listening? What's the listening? Because it isn't the same as yours. Second kind of listening I'd like to distinguish is inner listening. That's very important for anybody who's got a negative self-talk going on. Now, that's very common. Most of us have a little inner voice that's going, you idiot, you did it again, or don't you dare go on that dance floor, or whatever it might be. But particularly the you idiot, the abusive self-talk. Well, if that's you and that gets you stopped in certain situations, then here's a concept that may help you a great deal. Very important to understand, you are not that voice. It may be a part of you that got hurt, but it's not all of you. If you're not the voice, who are you? You're the one who's listening to the voice. You're the king on the throne. The voice is a jester coming up with suggestions. You're a bit of an idiot. Right, thanks. Ask yourself, is it useful? Is it kind? Is it true? If not, off you go, and I'm going on that dance floor anyway. So once you're in the position of power, you're the listener and not the voice. Anything becomes possible. Finally, let's deal with outer listening, and that is the most common form of listening. Outer listening. Ernest Hemingway said this, and I totally agree with him. And I want to prove to you that most people don't listen by giving you a little quiz. So are you ready with a bit of paper or something like that? And I'm going to ask you some questions. So you're a bus driver. At the first bus stop, 4 people get on, 3 of them are male and 1 is female. And 1 male has a red hat. At the second stop, 5 get on, 2 male and 3 female, and 2 males get off. At the third stop, 3 people get on, they're all male, and 1 of them has a blue umbrella. And at the final stop, 12 people get on, 8 males, 4 females, 2 of the males are wearing football scarves, and 3 people get off, all of them male, including the one with the red hat. Now, did you get all that? My question to you is, how old is the bus driver? Baffled? At the very beginning, I said, you're a bus driver. There you go. Most people don't listen. If you did get that, very well done. There's normally in an audience of a few hundred people, there are like 2 or 3 who get that. But most people don't listen very carefully. And actually, I have to say the situation is compounded when we get to be organizations, because most organizations are terrible at listening. This is the result of a big survey which was done in 2016, the Organizational Listening Project. They looked at all sorts of organizations and they found across all of them this result. Most of them are terrible. I'll give you an example of that. I wonder if you can guess what this is. It's the average length of time in America that you get when you go to the doctor to tell the doctor what's wrong with you before the doctor interrupts you. 18 seconds. That's not very long, is it? Interrupting, thinking we know best, not listening, being impatient, it's all there. And that's an average, don't forget. So a lot of people are quicker than that. Organizations really should be in balance. You know, speaking and listening are 2 sides of a coin. They should be in balance. But actually, the Organizational Listening Project found that the organizations self-reported claimed that 80% of their resources, time, money, budget, emphasis, effort, training, everything was going on speaking, on communicating outbound, and only 20% on listening. That's self-reported, so I think that's probably exaggerated. Now, that's important because what they also found is that the organizations which were rated highly in listening had much more of the stuff on the green side of this chart. The organizations which rated at the bottom of the listening charts had much more of the red stuff. Which one do you want in your organization? There are 4 C's to effective listening, ladies and gentlemen, 4 C's. The first and most important one is being conscious that you're doing something. That's key. The second is commitment. It takes time to listen. We have to put things down. Scott Peck said you cannot truly listen to another human being and do anything else at the same time. I agree with that. So it takes commitment. Then we have to be compassionate. We are seeking to understand. And it's really important, even if you disagree, it's quite interesting to say, well, I really don't agree with you, but I can see how you got there from your perspective. And the final C is curiosity. I might learn something here. That's a tremendous place to listen from, being curious. Now, I want to give you some very quick, simple exercises which will help you to develop your conscious listening in your organization. And you can pass these on to other people and demonstrate them to other people, pass these ideas on so that there's a ripple effect and people start listening to you. It's very difficult, I have to say, if you're in an organization where people are not listening to you, take on board my tips about speaking powerfully, because you may be part of the problem. But if people are just poor at listening, it really doesn't work very well to say, you know what, you're a terrible listener. That doesn't work very well in my experience. So it is unfortunately a question of demonstrating this and showing how it works. But you may find if you go home tonight and you practice those 4 C's, next time one of your family talks to you, put everything down, look at them, and actually pay attention. You'll probably find they'll go, "What are you doing?" Because they're so not used to you giving them 100%. It's a great gift, a wonderful gift to give somebody 100% of your attention. So, some simple exercises. Here's the first one. Silence. Just a few minutes a day, give yourself silence. It recalibrates your ears, resets you. It's a wonderful way to reconnect with sensitivity in your hearing. Second one I call the mixer. And that's like wherever you are, it could be in a noisy cafe like this. You could distinguish the sources of sound around you. It's not just a mush. There's a person over 3 people I'm listening to. There's the barrister. Different channels on a mixing desk, different sources of sound. Or if you're in a beautiful place like this, where are the birds? Where are the ripples coming from? That's a great exercise to get more acute with your listening. Savoring is the third exercise, like this guy's with his cup of coffee. You can do this with any sound around you. There's a hidden choir waiting to be discovered. And also there are some bad sounds which are affecting you adversely that you're not noticing. So get into the habit of tasting the sound around you. I'll give you one example. Now, that's a simple kettle, but it's very interesting. It has an arc, a story arc, if you're a filmmaker. It's got some tremendous frequencies and vibrancy in it. Little sounds like that can be quite fun. So get into the habit of savoring sound, and you might find some that you really enjoy. This is a very important exercise, listening positions, if you like, not physical positions. I'll give you some examples. Different ways to listen, if you like. Active listening. Very useful in the therapeutic professions. What I heard you say is ... and you repeat exactly what the person said. It won't win you many friends if you do it all the time to your friends, but it is very useful to, for example, a recalcitrant teenager who's shouting at you. If people feel heard, and that's what this does, they tend to calm down and become more rational. Active listening is the opposite of passive listening. Perhaps that would be like a Zen master. Cut off the meaning making, simply listen to the sound and remove all meaning making. Be with the sound, nothing going on in your head. Critical listening. It's what you've been doing to me since I started. So it's assessing, judging, validating, invalidating. That little voice in your head all the time that's going, the one that just said, what little voice is he talking about? That little voice is your critic. And it's very useful in business a lot of the time. However, if we get stuck there, that can be a problem. Sometimes it's important to move into empathic listening. If somebody comes to you with a request for time off for a bereavement, you don't want to be marking them out of 10 for how well they're doing this, or is this relevant, or anything like that. You need to be going onto their island, feeling their feelings, being with them, and leaving them the feeling not just heard, but also understood. Now, this is a gender stereotype. I fully own that. So I want to be very clear. Gender stereotype alert. Nevertheless, most men, not all men, some men, most men, tend to listen in a way I call reductive, which is for a point, to solve a problem, to get to a destination. I've got a problem. Here's the solution. Oh, thanks. That's a typical male conversation. Very short, very simple. Women, not all women, not all the time, women tend to listen in a way that I call expansive. And that is going with the flow. In expansive listening, there is no point. It's not about reaching a destination. It's about enjoying the journey. That's it. Now, those two things are quite different, and they tend to give rise to a lot of the he never listens to me or she never listens to me dialogue in relationship. I'll give you an example. She comes home and says, I've had a terrible day. This happened, this happened, this happened. He looks up from the football and says, darling, that's awful. Have a bath. It always makes you feel better. Now, in the male world, that's problem solved. Back to the football. In the female world, that was not quite what she was looking for. She was looking for much more, darling, that's awful. Sit down. Let me pour you a glass of wine. Tell me all about it. Those words which strike dread into many male hearts. Tell me all about it. So, if we can move from these listening positions, or at least understand them, it can really improve communication. Give you a couple more examples. Distracted listening, very common these days. Yeah, no, I am listening to you. No, you're sending a text. That's not the same thing at all. Try to practice some focused listening. Can't do it all the time. We have to do other things as well, but be conscious when you're focused and when you're distracted. Just be conscious of that difference. And here's an important one right now. Listening from fear, which is what a lot of us are doing at the moment with this crisis. It's a pretty uncomfortable place to be, listening from fear. Oh, what's going to happen? Oh, it's going to go. Oh, it's all going pear-shaped. Everything's going to go. It's a lot more comfortable today to live in listening from faith. And that is just thinking all will be well. It'll be okay. I'll be okay. My family will be okay. Let's cross each bridge as we come to it. Every new thing that comes along, every new restriction or law or whatever it may be, let's cross it as we come to it. It'll be all right. We'll get to the other side and then we'll move on, one thing at a time. So fear, faith, two sides of a coin. And I know which one I feel more comfortable in. Final exercise, rasa. Rasa, receive, appreciate, summarize, ask. Actually, it's also the Sanskrit word for juice, rasa. Receive, appreciate, summarize, ask. So receive means paying attention, eye contact, facing the person, square on, giving them your attention. Appreciate little noises or head movements if you're face to face. Oh, really? Which oil conversation. Summarize, the word so, very important. So what we've agreed is this. Now we can move on to that. You know, if you don't have a so person in the meeting, it can be a very long meeting, can't it? What do they say? Meetings are places where you take minutes and waste hours. And then ask questions all the way through. Why, what, when, which, how. Those open-ended questions that don't permit the answer yes or no, which tease more out. If you're somebody who finds it difficult to get across and that people aren't listening to you, asking questions and being attentive is a wonderful entry into a conversation. Tell me more is a great phrase. Or just question, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. If you're paying attention, people love it and they will tend to get into a positive circle of speaking and listening with you. Let me finish by giving you some ideas about how to create a listening organization. It's not easy, ladies and gentlemen. It does take communication. It takes accountability somewhere, commitment and training. First of all, you have to realize this thing is worthwhile fighting for and putting some effort into. There are organizations which are doing this and they're putting a great deal of time, effort, budget, and thought into listening better internally and also to their customers as well. What it takes most of all is listening from the top to the bottom. Who do you listen to? Well, first of all, employees. You want to listen to your staff, your customers, your business partners, stakeholders, and perhaps some experts. Perhaps not, but perhaps some experts, as is being done right now by the government. Then what are the stages? What are the actions that you need to take? Well, first of all, it takes commitment from the leadership. It's not an email going around, tomorrow we are listening organization. Really doesn't work. So the leadership, I've been in organizations where the leader is so frightening, people don't want to give them bad information and the whole thing falls apart. If the leader's not listening, it's a problem. Culture. The culture of the organization, which isn't a plaque on the wall necessarily, well, it is sometimes, but is the behavior in tune with the culture? And what is it? Is it a listening behavior, or do people talk over each other in meetings and ignore all the quiet people in the meeting and not ask if they've got a point of view? Does that happen in your organization? Spaces. Do you have places where people can listen, or is it just noisy and difficult? Are the meeting rooms jangly and hard surfaces and everything reverberates and bad sound makes for bad meetings, in my experience? Do you have training on listening? Is it a thing at all? Let's do some listening training this month. And is there any accountability for it? And is it appraised in your 360s? If you have 360s, is there a question, how good is he or she at listening? And do you reward people who are good listeners? The benefits, the things you're listening, good stuff you're listening for, that's better sales, better service, outstanding sales and service requires very, very good listening skills. Opportunities to do things better, differently, make more profit, grow faster, whatever it is. You're also listening for the bad stuff, the danger, threats, complaints, crisis, all of those kind of things. And most of all, you're listening for ideas and involvement. Become a champion of listening, ladies and gentlemen. Become a champion. Explain it, encourage, show it. You can't tell people off for not doing it, but what you can do is spread it. I would say like a virus, but I won't say that. Spread it, make the ripples go out in your organization. Engage people in the importance of listening. But even if you can't do that, do it yourself. I hope you've got 3 things out of this talk. And I hope also that these 3 things have benefited. If you found what I've been talking about interesting, I've only had a short time here really to go through this with you, then I'll give you a couple of ways in which you can dive deeper. There's a very easy one. That's my book, How to Be Heard, which is out there. It's a substantial book, and it's got lots of interviews with interesting people who know a lot about speaking and listening skills, lots of exercises and lots of tips from me. And it's also an award-winning book. I'm very proud that it won both the major awards, the audiobook did, for Best Business Audiobook of last year. And if you want to go deeper still, I have recently created a major online course, How to Speak So That People Want to Listen. Took me a year. It's everything I know about speaking and listening. So it's what you've just had, but a lot longer, because it's actually 7.5 hours. It's got 9 chapters, and there's a whole chapter on public speaking, if you ever have to present to people, chapters on listening skills, speaking skills, and so forth. 39 downloadable exercises. It's quite a big piece of work. And access to this course, because it's quite major, is lifetime access. So it's one access that then it gives you a lifetime of using this, and you can go back and refer to it and refresh. So if you want to go into this deep, if speaking is important to you in your life, or if listening is really important to you, this is the place to go. That course is on our website. It's priced at £597, but actually we've recently reduced it to £297 because of the virus having its huge effect on my industry, apart from anything else. So it's on for £297. I have some good news for you. Amanda and her team have persuaded me to put an incredible offer to you guys. So for you, for people, just the people listening to this, we're not going to price it at £297. I can't believe I'm saying this. £97 is the offer to London's Calling. Now, at that price, 7.5 hours of material, that's unbelievable. You're saving £500 off the full price of the course. I'm really excited to make that offer to you, actually, because I hope you've seen through this talk today how important these skills are in every aspect of life. So I do encourage you. What do you do? Well, you're going to go to speaklistenbe.com, speaklistenbe.com, and all you do is enter this code, LC for London Calling 2020 for this year, and we've set that up. It's there for just 1 week. Now, I many times have thought, I'll do that next Monday or something, and then forget, and a week goes by and I go, oh, I forgot. So I don't delay, don't miss out. And I do encourage you, and I hope you'll feed back to me. I'd be delighted to have your communication if you're going to take on the course. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much for giving me your ears today, for paying attention. I hope this has been powerful. I hope I've been able to give you some great concepts which will help you in your communication, particularly your listening. So I'd like to wish you a safe, healthy 2020, and also a happy listening 2020. Thanks so much, and see you again.